8 minutes past 5 o'clock, and we're staying with our main story today that 20 years after the Supreme Court judgment in the X case, the government has decided to legislate and regulate for abortion in cases where there's a risk to the life as opposed to the health of the mother. For further reaction on this decision, I'm joined by Sinead Ahern of Choice Ireland. She's also the chair of the Labour Women Group, and by Caroline Simons, legal consultant with the Pro-Life campaign. Caroline Simons, we have just a two-page release from the Department of Health announcing the government decision today. It is still short on detail, but can I have an initial reaction from you to this decision to legislate and regulate?
Well, my initial reaction, Mary, is that legislation and regulation for the X case decision means legislation and regulation for abortion into Ireland. And it's the first time any Irish government will have tried to introduce an abortion regime into this country where you will be directly and intentionally targeting a baby for destruction. So it is a chilling, a new development. It's something that fills us with concern. Once you've conceded the principle that all human life has to be protected, it will lead to wide-ranging abortion. That is what the X case contemplates. And while I and the Pro-Life campaign are deeply concerned that every woman who goes into any maternity hospital in the country can expect to receive the professional care that they always do get, that any intervention that's required will be given, we are also of the mind that there is a duty of care to the unborn life, and I'm afraid that the X case doesn't respect that. Not alone does it not uphold any duty of care to the unborn, it also puts no time limit into these abortions.
So does your campaign start here, and what form will your campaign take?
Our campaign started many years ago, before I even became involved in it some 20 years ago. We're certainly going to vigorously oppose this decision to introduce an abortion regime based on X. I think it's always been clear we would do that. We will, of course, treat all of our politicians with the respect that we always have treated them, but we will, and we do intend to have a robust and sustained challenge to each and every part of the legislation that they're going to bring forth.
I'm joined as well by Sinead Ahern. Sinead Ahern, there are no timelines. I was saying with Caroline Simons, we have a very short announcement from the Department of Health today, and it is short on detail. There are many questions still to be asked, but we are told legislation and regulation, and they say the drafting of legislation supported by regulations will be within the parameters of Article 43.3 of the Constitution as interpreted by the Supreme Court in the X case. So as Caroline Simons says, we expect it will be providing for abortion in the case of the life of the mother being at risk, including a risk there of suicide. But there are no timelines. We don't know, other than an Oireachtas Health Committee sitting in January, we don't know when other elements towards legislation will come on stream. When do you think we might have legislation?
Well, first of all, I think Choice Ireland very much welcomed this decision to legislate. It's 21 years overdue at this point, and we're hoping that the government act in a very, very timely manner. At this point, as we've said, we're 20 years waiting for legislation. The expert group report is quite detailed in terms of the provisions and recommendations in terms of how many doctors need to sign off to allow a termination, what assessment procedures a woman would have to go through, and also an appeals mechanism for a woman. The expert group is very clear on that. So we don't see any particular reason for delay on this. We have all of the information that we need. I think it's important to point out, though, that what this is providing for is abortion in incredibly limited circumstances. Only provides for abortion in cases where there is a direct threat to the life of the mother, where that threat is immediate, and also where termination is the only realistic hope of saving
Do we know
that
that
life.
yet? Do we know that yet, given that we haven't seen any draft anything? We don't have regulations, we don't have the draft heads of a bill.
The government have been very clear that this will fall very closely in line with the X case ruling in 1992 and also with the recommendations of the expert group report. Both that ruling and the expert group document are very clear in terms of the circumstances that there does need to be a very immediate threat to the woman's life. So if the government, as they have said very clearly this evening, are to remain true to that, and they've also said that they will remain strictly faithful to the terms of Article
So,
43.
Sinead Ahern, do you expect to see some facility for abortion in the case of rape or incest?
I would imagine that there won't be. Constitutionally, I don't see how that could be the case. given that there has to be, the X case is very clear that there has to be a direct threat to the life of the mother, and because neither of those cases would necessarily arise to a direct threat to the life of the mother, I think it's in fact impossible for the government to legislate in those circumstances. Without a constitutional referendum, we cannot go beyond the very strict terms laid down by the X case.
And how does that sit? How does that sit with you and your members?
I think we're pleased that the government has taken some action, but we would very much see this as a minimum first step. This will only affect a very tiny number of the Irish women who terminate pregnancies every year, and won't cover women like those very brave women who came forward last year carrying pregnancies that wouldn't survive outside the womb in cases of rape, incest or a severe threat even to the health of the mother. None of those cases will be covered here, and we would ask the government to consider consider a referendum repealing the Eighth Amendment, and to look at the broader issue of abortion in this country, and not just these very tiny and restrictive cases. We'll still have an abortion regime even when this legislation comes through.
Caroline,
that will be among the strictest in the world.
Let me bring it back in, Caroline Simons. Caroline Simons, will you be participating at the hearings in the Oireachtas Committee on Health and Children, which are going to hold hearings, we're told, in January? If you're invited in to attend, will you be going there to make your case?
Of course, and if there's any question that we wouldn't be invited, we'll be looking for that invitation, Mary. As I said, there is nothing restrictive about this, and I think you only have to listen to Sinead's language. She's on record of saying she favours abortion to be available throughout 9 months of pregnancy for whatever reason the woman might choose it. She and Claire Daly and Ivana Bacik have said that this is a welcome first step. So I think people should listen very carefully to the language that they're using, because it reflects the truth of the matter. We're now in a situation where our government is proposing to legislate for abortion on a medical basis in circumstances where no medical necessity for abortion has ever been demonstrated. It reminds me a little bit, and we think we're in progressive times.
How do you know that? Sorry, Caroline Simons, how do you know that at this stage?
Because it is the truth. Because when this went on in the 90s, the Medical Council looked for evidence from among the profession of circumstances in which abortions were necessary to save women's lives, and that evidence was not forthcoming. And you even find confusion among the obstetricians who are talking with the government, at this point. I know one obstetrician I had a conversation with recently talked in terms of a woman who was suicidal at 24 weeks, that she should be committed. And when I said, and what if she's 20 weeks? Oh, well, that's different. So the question in my mind was, well, now, who are you looking after? Is it the mental health or whatever? The point I wanted to make, Mary, was this. We look back to the Middle Ages when the Church challenged the truth that science was showing, and people like Galileo suffered. We're now in a situation where the politicians are not looking at the truth that science is showing us, and I think if they go along this route, we're going to regret it in the years to come.
Is the issue for you, Caroline Simons, I just want to be clear with you, on legislation to give effect to the decision of the Supreme Court in X, is the real problem for you here the question of suicide being a reason to enable a woman to seek a termination of her life and
the
threat of suicide?
Problem,
or is it abortion?
The problem is more fundamental than that, Mary. The problem is that it is allowing a situation where it is considered that it is all right to target intentionally the life of the unborn and regard that as an appropriate treatment for any complication of a pregnancy, when that necessity has never been demonstrated. And I was very upset to hear, in place of Olivia O'Leary yesterday, your Mr. Duffy on the programme, and I would use this opportunity to ask, please, if an opportunity might be afforded to me or to somebody on the pro-life side to address the points he made in relation to abortion yesterday.
Well, I can tell you, you can address it yourself now.
I would like to have the same latitude and opportunity to speak as he was given yesterday, which would mean on my own.
You have the opportunity now to respond to it, Caroline, if you want to take it up.
I think anybody who listened to Drive Time yesterday will see the point that I'm making. You can listen to it on the RT player.
If you want to take up the opportunity, I'm offering it to you now to respond to the column from Paddy yesterday.
Absolutely. I mean, the fact is we have a government that has accepted what is now considered, and what was considered by many at the time, to be a flawed decision of the Supreme Court. Flawed only in the sense that there was not adequate medical evidence given to the court, and flawed in the sense that the abundance of medical evidence that has become available since makes it clear that abortion is not an appropriate treatment for a complication of pregnancy, and it does not save women's lives. And that being the case, this is a dishonest basis upon which to propose to legislate for abortion.
But this is an issue that you've picked up, on your side picks up again and again, in relation to that Supreme Court decision going back to 1992. You're a lawyer. This was the highest court in the land delivering a decision. You can't cherry pick Supreme Court judgments to suit your case.
Supreme Court judgments don't always hold forever, Mary, and
If you don't like
they're not
them.
correct for all time. No, they're not correct for all time, and they are reviewed from time to time in terms of referenda and that kind of thing. If people took the attitude you just demonstrated, you would have people like you would have Gareth Pearce not taking cases to keep people who shouldn't have been in prison.
That's an entirely different thing. Gareth Pearce wasn't challenging a Supreme Court decision.
It may be the case, but Supreme Court decisions have got to be looked at.
We need to go back.
No medical evidence
we need
in
Caroline
that case.
Simons to go back to the question of today and the decision from the Department of Health today that we are told they're going to regulate and legislate for abortion. Is your final position that you still want a referendum?
I certainly do not want any legislation which would introduce abortion in the sense of directly and intentionally killing unborn children. There is no medical need for it. It is not progressive. It is not liberal. It is utterly chilling. This is a historical moment, and I certainly would regard it as retrograde if we went down this route. I, at the same time, will say that I am very concerned as a woman, as a mother of daughters as well, that every woman in this country can continue to be confident of the highest standard of medical care in pregnancy, and I would be very afeared that this will change the practice of medicine in Ireland, and we will become far from being the beacon and the high standards that we show to the rest of the world. We will just follow the same sorry, sordid route that we have seen in other jurisdictions.
Sinead Ahern, this is the start of opening the floodgates to abortion on demand in this country. That's the view of Caroline Simons.
Well, I think just to pick up on a few things that Caroline has pointed out there, Caroline has said that the Supreme Court never heard any medical evidence. Actually, they heard evidence from a psychologist testifying to the girl's suicidality, and that was never challenged. The state or anyone else didn't challenge the fact that she was suicidal either in the High Court or the Supreme Court. The challenge was in terms of whether or not that risk was immediate enough or grave enough to allow her termination. That was the question that was discussed at the High Court and the Supreme Court. So this idea that the judgment was flawed in some way, I think is inaccurate.
Okay,
I don't think this is possible to bring in abortion on demand or open the floodgates. Our Constitution is very clear that there is a strict balance between the right to life of the unborn and the right to life of the mother. Now, it does come down in favour, I suppose, where those two rights come into direct conflict in favour of the right to life of the mother, but only in cases, and the Supreme Court is very clear on this, the expert group is very clear on this, and the government seem very clear on this today based on the wording of their statement, that they will be staying faithful to that and that they will not allow abortion in cases beyond the case to a direct and immediate threat to the right to life of the mother. And I think it's disingenuous to suggest otherwise. Now, yes, would I like to see it expanded beyond to allow more other difficult situations that women find themselves in every day, to expand to fit the 12 women a day that are right now packing their bags to leave the jurisdiction to terminate pregnancies. Yes, I would love the government to address those issues, but they cannot, given the current state of the Constitution, and will not through any legislation.
All right, this is the start of a debate that is going to go on. As we say, the Oireachtas Committee on Health is going to be having hearings in January, moving on from there to the draft heads of a bill. For now, Sinead Ahern, Caroline Simons, thank you both for joining us. 21 minutes past 5 o'clock.